$1 million. Free to play. You just need to survive. It's the Fanatics NFL Survivor Pool. Pick one team to win each week. Get it right, move on. Get it wrong, you're out. The last fan standing take home a guaranteed $1 million cash prize. And for every player who joins, we add $1 to the pot, up to $10 million. The Fanatics NFL Survivor Pool. Play free on the Fanatics app. App access open to all. Must be 21 plus and joined by 9/8 to play. No purchase necessary. U.S. only. Void where prohibited. Subject to complete terms. See fanatics.com/game rules.
Leading a business today means constantly adapting. On the Executive Insights podcast brought to you by AWS, global leaders share how they're making tough calls, testing bold ideas, and putting innovation into practice, generative AI included. If you're looking for real stories behind what's working, this is it. Subscribe to the Executive Insights podcast today. Available now on all major podcast platforms.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Joining me now is Richard Brzeczek. He is the former superintendent of the Chicago Police Department, serving in that position from 1980 to 1983. Richard Brzeczek joined the Chicago Police Department in 1964, joining as a simple patrol officer, rising through the ranks to become the superintendent of police, one of the most respected law enforcement professionals in the country today. And he joins us to talk about the horrific situation in Chicago. Over the past Labor Day, you had 52 people shot, 8 people killed, 4 mass shootings. Yet Governor J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Brandon Johnson insists that crime is actually under control and dropping. There's no evidence that is the case. President Donald Trump has clearly already made the decision to send in the National Guard to ensure the safety of the people of Chicago. Let's listen to the president.
Make your mind up on Chicago, though?
Well, we're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. When you lose, look, I have an obligation. This isn't a political thing. I have an obligation. When we lose, when 20 people are killed over the last 2.5 weeks and 75 are shot with bullets. So let me tell you a little story about a place called D.C., District of Columbia, right here where we are. It's now a safe zone. We have no crime. It's in such great shape. You can go and actually walk with your children, your wife, your husband. You can walk right down the middle of the street. You're not going to be shot, Peter. You're safe.
That is the president. Sounds to me like he's made up his mind. And before we go to Richard Brzeczek, the former superintendent of police, let's listen to Mayor Brandon Johnson and his reaction.
Are you prepared to defend this land that was built by slaves, a land that was built by indigenous people, a land that is built by workers? Are you prepared to defend this land? The people united will always prevail. I need you all to stand firm, to stand strong. If this president decides to continue to break this Constitution.
This is unbelievable. President Trump's clearly getting ready to send the National Guard to Chicago to keep order and for the safety of the people. Another former police superintendent, Gary McCarthy, says this is a bad idea. But when he joined the Roger Stone Show earlier in the week, Richard Brzeczek disagreed with that. Why is McCarthy wrong, and why are you and the president right, Richard?
Well, because the problem is real. There is like an overload, an overdose of criminality, violent criminality going on in Chicago. McCarthy came from New York via Newark. He got in trouble as a command officer in New York. He got in trouble with sexual harassment lawsuits and some other civil rights matters in Newark. And Chicago thought he would be a great fit because they think he's got that Democrat attitude that, what's in it for me? He was the superintendent, by the way, that was in charge of the department when the biggest cover-up of anything that ever happened in Chicago, the Laquan McDonald shooting, took place. And that's when they unwittingly had a video of a police officer firing and killing Laquan McDonald 16 times, 16 hits, while about 15 to 20 officers around there never even had their guns off. They were there first. This was one of the last people to arrive. So what they did, McCarthy saw the video the next morning, and they covered it up. Rahm Emanuel paid the family $5 million as hush money. No lawsuit was filed. They refused to release the video until the judge ordered it so. And then a day before the video was actually released, they indicted the officer who did the shooting. So that's for McCarthy. There's nobody in the command level, including McCarthy, took responsibility for not what actually happened out on the street, but for making sure that there was a quick, expeditious, fair, objective, honest investigation of the shooting of Laquan McDonald, and there wasn't. They tried to cover it up. And this is what they're doing now. They don't want the president to come in with any kind of resources because they're afraid that, one, the president is going to find what he already knows exists, and that's the neoplasm, the cancer of corruption that has existed in the Cook County Democrat Central Party and existed in Chicago for all of these years. It goes back even to the 1800s when Chicago was very embracing to anarchists. But it continues on today in modern Chicago. And then the people, elect, people like Johnson or people before him like Lightfoot or Rahm Emanuel, or even before that, Richie Daley. That's the second guy, who got in there because of his father's name. But he actually was the one that ruined the department because he despises the police. That was the attitude. He takes care of his political cronies. They abolished the rank of captain, and then he reinstated it as an appointed rank so he can make all of his cronies captains. And then they went on to call merit promotions. You could ask any police officer in Chicago, stop him on the street and ask him what he thinks of merit promotions. It's a euphemism for political clout. It's a euphemism for what they call in New York a rabbi. It's another euphemism for what they call in Chicago a Chinaman. That means you've got a political sponsor, and that's how you get promoted. People go from police officer to a high-ranking position and cannot pass a test, so they just promote them anyway because of merit. But there's no objective measure of merit either, which there can't be. See, the problem is with exams, they're discriminatory. That's why we had affirmative action nonsense a generation ago. I testified that, all exams are discriminatory. They discriminate between those who know the answers and those who don't know the answers. Discrimination is the raison d'etre of exams. You separate the people who know versus who don't know. Bar exams, medical licensing exams, real estate exams, first grade exams. There's your answer. Who has the correct answers and who doesn't? So this is all nothing more than a cover-up because they don't want the exposure. A lot of people forgot there's a collateral story. The Justice Department asked Pritzker, the governor who removed the toilets from his mansion and had his house reappraised so he can get a break, on his real estate taxes. I think it was about $300 and some thousand. Nobody went to jail for that, but he did get caught, and they, put the money back. It's like committing bank robbery, and you get arrested usually by the local police, and the FBI comes in and steals the arrest from you. But they arrest the bank robber and say, okay, since you still have the money, give it back to the bank and we'll let you go. That's what Pritzker did with his reassessment of his mansion by trying to falsify its worth by taking out the toilets. Here's a billionaire, really a great man of integrity, but he's looking at 2028. He wants to be president. And God forbid if his grandfather, A.N. Pritzker, who I knew personally was a wonderful, wonderful man, saw what his grandson is doing, I think he'd step on him like a fly and rub him out because he's an embarrassment to the grandfather and all the other ancestral Pritzkers who worked hard to develop, their family net worth and the Hyatt Regency campaign. So this is what Pritzker's looking at is 2028, the next presidential election, because he has delusions of grandeur, just like Newsom out in California and other people that think they're going to come in and ride on what they perceive to be the adverse reaction, the coattails of the adverse reaction toward President Trump. The unfortunate thing is nobody in the Democrat Party, including Pritzker, including Brandon Johnson with his desperate speeches, are going to best or outdo or outclass President Trump's actions. President Trump says something, and he does it. People agree with him. People disagree with him. The people who disagree with him find out later that he was right. So far, he's been right, and he wants to come in. And this is not without precedent. Daley and the governor of Illinois at the time brought in the National Guard for the 1968 Democrat Convention. They brought him in on the front end for a prophylactic preventive manpower display. They also brought in the National Guard, and then they brought in regular Army troops from President Johnson in April of 68, 4 months before the convention, when the King riots were taking place. And I remember being on the street at that time alongside soldiers who were coming back for R&R from Vietnam, from Fort Hood, Texas, and Fort Carson, Colorado. And these kids were not very happy. And I call them kids, even though I was only a year or two older than they at the time. But what I'm saying is this is not without precedent. Somehow Muriel Bowser in Washington, saw the light, and she is now basking in the sun of what's happening in Washington, all because she went along with President Trump's idea, let's give it a try. When you talk about crime, the last place my wife and I lived in Chicago was a neighborhood right north of downtown called River North. It was the hottest area at the time. There was a rap party going on, a rap performer party going on in a restaurant close enough I could toss a baseball to that restaurant from where we used to live. And there were 4 people shot and murdered, and I think it was in the teens, the exact number who were wounded. And I don't think the case is solved yet. That's well over a month ago. But the thing is that they look the other way. I mean, who wants to walk around among the River North art galleries or the fine restaurants there that are closing down because nobody's going there? The thing is that Democrats don't understand economics. They understand how to steal because they've been doing that all their lives in Cook County and in Washington, but they know how to steal. But they don't care about economics. I mean, when they had the riots after that pseudo-hero, the drug dealer, George Floyd, they were rioting on the Magnificent Mile, rioting. And you know what happened? Mayor, what's her name, Lightfoot, okay? She said, let them go because those places have insurance. Well, who pays the insurance? Do you pay the insurance, Mayor? No, they pay out of their own pockets. They pay out of their sales, out of their commercial transactions. And if that's the way you look at it, she's dumb to begin with, but that's simple economics. Yeah, By the way, I want you to know she belongs at Harvard because Harvard's full of plagiarizers, and plagiarizers are liars. And she is the only attorney I know. She may be the first black or woman of color attorney who, in a written opinion by the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, accused her of lying. Okay, so if she had the gall or the temerity to lie to the Seventh Circuit, the people out there in Chicago are fodder for her lying. And it's the same thing with this guy, Brandon Johnson. What he says is ridiculous. The best thing that he could do in terms of swaying the people of Chicago is stand up there and be the poster boy for the decades of failure for the Chicago public school system.
All right, we're going to have to take a quick break here. We're going to have to take a quick break here. I agree with you about one thing. J.B. Pritzker needs to run. Not for president. He just needs to run. We'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I'm Ashley Graham, and as a parent, I know the back-to-school transition can be a lot. When it comes to wellness, Ollie supports me and my family through it all. Kids Multi is big in my house. It supports their immune system, and they love to take it. A win-win for everyone. Shop these products at ollie.com or retailers nationwide. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
DC politicians want to enact harmful credit card mandates that could take away your cash back and rewards points. Perks that stretch your budget and make life a little easier. Losing these benefits means less money for your family's everyday essentials like gas and groceries. The perks you rely on could disappear, leaving you with higher costs and fewer options. Tell Congress to guard your card and oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card mandates.
Paid for by Electronic Payments Coalition.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome. We're back on the Roger Stone Show. My guest today, Richard Brzeczek, the former superintendent of police for the city of Chicago, serving in that position from 1980 to 1983 under one of the last great Democrat mayors of Chicago, my good friend, Mayor Jane Byrne. We're honored to have him. Richard, the Chicago Police Department is currently short 1,600 police officers. These are jobs that evidently no one will apply for. What is the reason for this?
Well, the reason for it is who would want to be a police officer in Chicago when the administration over in City Hall hates the police? They have placed so many restrictions, so many bars, so many impediments that, if I were a police officer there today, I would answer the radio and then go home, at the end of the tour of duty. I wouldn't do any real police work, which is not really done answering radio calls. It's proactive police work. But they don't want that done. They've got a consent decree there. It's being overseen by a federal judge. Tell me what federal judge knows anything about running a police department, but he's going to make the calls. We've had several police officers in the last few years in Chicago shot and killed with their guns in their holsters because they have a rule, and I think maybe a law now in Illinois, because, the General Assembly in Springfield, that's kind of like the Glee Club for the state mental hospital. But they have a law down there now where a police officer, if he draws his gun out of the holster, he's got to make a report because that is an act of the use of deadly force. Are you serious? That's why people are being killed, men and women. Ella French was one that I can think of off the top of my head. She died with her gun in a holster because they stopped the car, approached it, and she got shot and killed. Now, she didn't draw the gun because who wants to keep writing reports? When I was over in Fillmore as a young police officer in 64 and 65, we get maybe 8-9 calls a night. It was busy. And when you're going into a place like shots fired or woman screaming for help or man with a gun, When we got out of the car, the guns came out of the holster. We carried them by the side of our thigh. We weren't pointing them at anyone, but we were eliminating the wasted time of unsnapping the holster and drawing the weapon. You know, if someone pointed a gun at us, we had the gun out. You just raise it, and that was it. But, you know, they got these rules that people who are making these rules are making these decisions in courts to monitor all this stuff. They've never been on the streets of Chicago. They don't know what goes on out there. They don't know what it's like to have bullets whizzing past your head. You know, I mean, they had, a couple of years ago, they had a great FBI agent, you know, and I use that facetiously, from Philadelphia come in as a carpetbagger superintendent. He went out to the south side, an intersection where there was a shooting the night before, and during the press conference, it's a political stunt, more gunfire took place. All the officers in the blue shirts, they ran toward the gunfire. He turned, jumped in his car, and went back downtown. They nicknamed him Jay Fed. When he came, they changed it to Jay Fled after the incident. You know, I mean, that's the kind of people. What do people think? The FBI agents know how to run police departments? They're investigators. They're not police officers. You know, so you know, all of these Band-Aid approaches don't work. The guy who had the answer is now dead. It was Professor James Q. Wilson, when he and George Kelling wrote the article in Atlantic Magazine 40-some years ago, Broken Windows. That's the way you approach it, aggressive preventive patrol. That was the motto of O.W. Wilson, who was the big guru in law enforcement back in the 60s.
Those are, of course, the policies that Rudy Giuliani brought in New York, restoring New York to be one of the safest cities in the country. And every law enforcement professional that I respect says the broken windows policy is the way to go. It's too bad Chicago doesn't do it. I want to thank our guest, Richard Brzeczek, the former superintendent of the Chicago Police.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?